And so now what I do is I run my business Write with Chloe, and I help other aspiring authors become published authors without having to go through all of the same mistakes that I did. And I also help them figure out, or help you figure out, how to actually enjoy the process of writing. Because let's be honest, for a lot of us, particularly at the beginning, sitting down to write basically feels like you're going to the dentist and having 2 teeth pulled without anesthetic every fucking morning. Hello, beautiful people. I am so excited to be here. Share some of the behind the scenes stories that are more in-depth and juicy and have all the details that I can't normally share in the short form content I produce for you guys about writing and editing on Instagram. So I just want to start by introducing myself in case you don't know who I am. So my name is Chloe. I'm an author and a writing coach. And my debut memoir, The Girls, was published by Picador in 2019. And honestly, it was like freaking crazy to me, but it actually went on to win and get shortlisted for 3 national awards in Australia. WTF, a lifelong dream like coming true. And along the way, I had a lot of failures, but I also had a lot of successes. I had a New York agent take me out for breakfast. I had another publisher offer me $15,000 and a 2-book contract when she hadn't even read my full book. She'd read like 30 pages of my writing. At one point, I had I think it was 3 agents and 4 publishers all pitching against each other to represent my work. Crazy, crazy, crazy stuff after what felt like 12 years of nothing but setbacks and obstacles and rejections, right? And so now what I do is I run my business Write with Chloe, and I help other aspiring authors become published authors without having to go through all of the same mistakes that I did. And I also help them figure out, or help you figure out, how to actually enjoy the process of writing. Because let's be honest, for a lot of us, particularly at the beginning, sitting down to write basically feels like you're going to the dentist and having 2 teeth pulled without anesthetic every fucking morning. So unpleasant. So unpleasant, right? And actually for today's episode, this is exactly what I want to talk about. So you're going to have to forgive me. I'm a little bit nervous. It's my first episode, so I might be looking at my notes and all of that. But I believe deeply in just having a go, letting it suck, letting it be messy, and just showing up anyway. And this is really what I want to talk about today. Something that I see so many students doing to themselves is not knowing how to build a life and a routine around writing that isn't filled with anxiety, like just constant anxiety. You have this like big dream, you can see your name on the spine of a book, you visualize, your mom walking through the airport and pointing out to her friend, that's my daughter's book, you know where you want to go. But on that like day-to-day level of actually trying to execute that and take action and learn, it just feels like there is a volcano exploding in your body 24/7, let alone when you're actually even then going and sitting down to write. It's just plain miserable, right? So for me now, when I sit down to write, it's not like that at all. Like I love writing. Like I genuinely enjoy the process of writing. And I know that even when I don't write, I can feel that my body craves it, right? There's another whole story that I can tell, or an episode that I can do on how we build motivation that is intrinsic rather than requiring external validation. But before that, and I guess the focus of today's is like, how do we get rid of that sense of like anxiety that often lives in our bodies when we decide that we want to try and make it and become a published author? So like I said, that's not the case for me anymore. I don't live in that state anymore in regards to writing, but I used to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a story with you about how it used to be for me, and then how you can start to change that and make writing something pleasurable. So if we rewind the clock back to, say, when I was like 24 years old. I was an undergraduate creative writing student. I'd basically spent 5 years trying to figure out how to do this whole writing thing on my own. And so I would work for 9 months of the year, and then I would go traveling for 3 months of the year and just basically write. The whole time I was traveling, I would write. And I would produce a lot of words, vomit words, shitty words, but I could never figure out how to actually edit them into something of publishable quality. And so I decided that, okay, I need need to go and get some help. I need some sort of external accountability to make me actually finish what I'm starting, also to teach me how to edit. And so I enrolled in a university degree in creative writing. So that was amazing. I learned so much, and I would totally do the whole thing all over again. And one of the reasons for that is that it taught me how to finish pieces of work, because we would have an external deadline. Say we would have to submit 500 words, depending on the class, maybe every week, let's say, right? And so we would have to finish it. Not necessarily make it perfect, but finish it to a degree where we were comfortable submitting and sharing it. Not that that was ever comfortable, but you know what I mean, right? You couldn't just write the beginning and the middle of a story. You had to also write the end. And what I noticed is that in the lead up to this weekly submission, it was an editing class where we would get feedback every week, and we would have to submit 500 words every week. So in the lead up to then me sitting down and writing the first draft of this 500 word piece, my whole body would just be racked with anxiety, right? And I would spend every day, hour after hour, every day, all week, just in this state of anxiety, wondering, was today the day that I was going to write a first draft? Was today the day that I was going to write a first draft? No, next day. Was today the day that I was going to write a first draft? And also thinking about and when I do, will it be beautiful? Will the writing quality be amazing, or will it suck? And also what about the content? What am I going to write about, right? So there was just so much thinking going on, and so much fear, and so much uncertainty, and no real clear routine. And so there was literally just anxiety running through my body, and I would procrastinate. And so what I ended up doing, actually, it got to the point, to be really honest and vulnerable, it got to the point where the anxiety was so bad, but then one of those weekly deadlines would come around that it would be midday, the day before it was due. And I so clearly remember this because it's etched into my brain. I took 2 or 3 shots of hard spirit, liquor, alcohol, basically, in the middle of the day, just to try and quieten, to shut off the anxiety in my brain and the self-doubt and the inner critic, so I could just sit down and write this first draft. And I think that was a bit of a wake-up call for me, to be honest. It worked for that one day or that 1 week's submission. It took the 2 or 3 shots of alcohol, inner critic quietened down, the anxiety stopped, and I was able to just write and not, overthink it and blah, blah, blah. Sure. But it was a wake-up call in the sense of okay, this is not healthy, and this is not a pattern that we want to set up, and I actually need another solution. This is not something that I can start to build into my creative routine. The horror stories of how many writers are alcoholics. Let's not go down that route. And so I started to think about, okay, what's another solution? And there were 2 things that I put in place that changed everything for me. And the first one was I decided to make a rule for myself that if I did not write before midday, it wasn't even midday back then. It would have been 9 a.m. or something back then. If I didn't write before 9 a.m. that day, I was not allowed to write at all. That's it. It was a hard rule. Because what used to happen is I would, let's say I'd get up at 8 and I would think, okay, I'm just going to make my breakfast first and then I'll write. And then I would make my breakfast. Then I was okay, maybe I'll just answer my emails first and then I'll write. And I would answer my emails, and more anxiety, more self-doubt, didn't have an idea, all of these things. And then I would think, okay, maybe I just need to go for a run and then I'll write. And so this pattern would just play out. And so I made this rule. If I had not written by 9 a.m., then I was not allowed to write. And, for the first couple of days, it was kind of messy. I missed the deadline. 9 o'clock passed and I hadn't written. And then afterwards, I still had a bit of anxiety. Part of me wanted to write, but I just stuck to that rule. No, I'm not allowed to write. Slowly, what happened after doing this for a few days is, firstly, I started to build respect for that rule, and actually told myself no, we're gonna stick to this. And then secondly, it became I found a way to stop the procrastination, because I would get up and depending on the hour, I would have time for make a coffee. And then I had no choice except I had to sit down and write. So I would just sit down and write, even if it was shit, even if I didn't have an idea. Sometimes I would even write that oh, this is shit. Oh, I don't have an idea what to write about. But regardless, I would just sit down and write. And that for me was such a game changer. I Can't even really explain the why, but it worked. I just found myself starting to write consistently and write every day. And the second thing that I added in that also worked at that time was, as I mentioned, we had to submit this piece of writing once a week, 500 words once a week for this class. And even though I was by that stage then sitting down every morning to write, I realized like my next barrier was having an idea to write about, because that was also one of the things that was really stressing me out. And so again, I tried a few different things, experimented, which you can also do, play around, you don't just have to like import my exact strategies, more so use them as invitations to play and find your own and what works for you. And so I did all of that. I did some experimenting, and then I found what worked for me. And that was the night before I was going to write the first draft, I would go for a run. So let's say it was on the Monday morning, I was going to write my first draft. On the Sunday night, I would go for a run with the intention of receiving an idea in the form of a first line. So there's two important nuances here. Not a fully fleshed out idea. It is not what I was asking of myself. I was asking for the first line of an idea or the first line of the story. That's it. And the second important nuance is that I wasn't using my runs to intellectually hunt down the idea. No, I was using my runs to open my body to ask myself to like open and move into a state of receivership and then let something come to me, right? It's a really different energy when we're receiving from the body an idea or a first line in this example, as opposed going from the top down and intellectually hunting for an idea. This is not what I was doing, right? I was using the run to move energy and drop into a state of receivership, and then I would just wait for that first line to come to me. And that was it. When the first line came to me, I was free to just chill out and enjoy the rest of the run. I didn't ask myself to think of the rest of the plot, ask myself to think of a title or anything like that. Kept it really small. And then I would go home, shower, eat, whatever, go to sleep. And then the next morning when I woke up, I would just write before 9 a.m. I would just write that first line. And then what happened is the rest of a short story would just come on its own. All I needed that first line, and then the rest of the short story would just come on its own. And first couple of times it wasn't so neat, there were little glitches and there was some anxiety and there was blah, blah, blah. But if there's anything that I have learnt about creativity, it is this. Creativity, it wants to submit to you. It wants you to train it. It wants you to communicate to it and tell it how, when, where you want it to show up. And when you teach your creativity these things, listen. I promise you, it actually listens. And so the first couple of times, it's like a baby. It's like, oh, I'm confused. I don't know what she wants from me. By the third time, it understands what it wants from you. And so it will start to replicate that and deliver itself to you on cue. But you have to train it first, right? And you have to sit or be willing to sit through the initial 1 or 2 times of discomfort where maybe it's not quite working. Just trust that that's part of the process, and that by the 3rd or 4th time, it will understand what you are asking of it, and it will know exactly how to deliver. So for someone starting out, that's probably some of my biggest tips around where to start in terms of starting to sort of release that self-doubt and that constant anxiety that we have sometimes when we want something so bad. Just even taking those small steps of action just feels like too much, or like they're not going to get you to where you want to go. Try these 2 things. Let me know how you go with that. So this was my first ever time recording a podcast. I was kind of winging it, to be honest. Got a couple of notes, but was otherwise speaking off the cuff. So I would love to hear from you. I'm going to be making more podcasts, so I would love to know if there's something that you want me to speak about specifically. You can drop a question below. You can follow me on Instagram. It's at write_with_Chloe. And I offer more tips about writing and editing and just the whole lifestyle of being an author there as well. And otherwise, if you're really serious about wanting to develop a consistent practice, I have a free 3-part video email sequence, and it's called How to Write 10,000 Words in 30 Days. And if you go to the link below, you can download that, and I will email you out the 3 videos explaining how to start developing a consistent writing practice. And then lastly, it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of brain space to produce long form content. And I would love if you could sort of make this a 2-way exchange by sharing this episode with a friend, or sharing it on social media, or even dropping a review if you got something of value out of today's episode. And I look forward to speaking to you next time in the next episode. See you.